They say time heals all wounds, but that's not true. Time doesn't heal anything. You do. And the moment you stop expecting people to care, that's when the healing finally begins. Let's be honest. Most people don't care about your pain, not because they're cruel, but because they're busy carrying their own. Everyone is fighting silent battles. Rent, stress, anxiety, loneliness, their own hidden shame. When you understand this, you stop resenting the world for being indifferent. You start becoming free. But here's the paradox. Realizing that nobody cares isn't depressing. It's liberating, because if no one's really watching, you're finally free to stop performing, free to stop proving, free to live for what matters to you, not for their approval. In this episode, we'll explore how the Stoics turned this brutal truth into the foundation of peace, how Marcus Aurelius found serenity while ruling an empire, how Seneca endured exile and betrayal without bitterness, and how Epictetus, once a slave, discovered the kind of freedom that no master could ever take away. The ancient Stoics believed that the world doesn't owe you compassion, but that you owe yourself discipline. They saw pain not as punishment, but as training. And when you embrace that, the indifference of the world becomes your greatest teacher. Because think about it. How many times have you felt invisible? You give your best, yet nobody notices. You sacrifice, but few appreciate. You open up, only to be met with silence. That silence used to break you, but from today, it will build you. The truth is, we live in a world obsessed with validation. Every like, every comment, every small nod of approval feels like oxygen. Yet, the more we chase it, the emptier we become. It's a hunger that never ends, because it was never meant to be filled by others. You were meant to feed it yourself, through purpose, through clarity, through strength. And before this episode ends, I'll share one powerful Stoic exercise, the same mental shift that helped warriors, emperors, and outcasts develop emotional armor so strong. No insult or neglect could pierce it. Once you practice it, you will never see indifference the same way again. So take a breath. Step back from the noise, because from this point forward, you're going to see what happens when you finally stop begging the world to care and start caring enough to stand alone. When you first realize that nobody truly cares, it feels like a punch to the gut. You look round and think, what's the point of trying so hard if no one's even watching? That moment can either destroy you or rebuild you from the ground up. The difference lies in what you do next. And that's exactly what this episode is about. We live in an age that glorifies attention. From the moment we wake up, our minds are bombarded with metrics, likes, follows, comments, engagement, impressions. Somewhere along the line, we confuse visibility with worth. We began to believe that being seen equals being valuable. But the truth, as every Stoic would tell you, is far simpler and far more brutal. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to understand yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He wasn't telling us to isolate ourselves. He was reminding us that real peace starts where external approval ends. Because when you depend on others to validate your worth, you hand them the keys to your happiness. You let strangers, co-workers, or even family members dictate how you feel about yourself. That's not freedom. That's emotional slavery. The Stoics understood this centuries before social media existed. They lived in a world just as chaotic as ours. Wars, politics, betrayal, gossip, poverty. Yet somehow, they found stillness in the middle of it all. How? By shifting focus from what they couldn't control, people's opinions, outcomes, or recognition, to what they could, their own mind, their own choices, their own integrity. That's the foundation of this philosophy. And that's what we'll uncover today. How the realization that nobody truly cares can become the most freeing, stabilizing, and empowering truth of your life. Because here's the secret. When you stop expecting the world to applaud, you start doing what's truly worth applauding. You stop living reactively, chasing every compliment or fearing every criticism. You start living intentionally, with quiet conviction and purpose. And that, according to the Stoics, is the essence of peace. In the next hour, we'll journey through 3 powerful layers of this idea. First, we'll explore why people don't care as much as you think, and why that's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll talk about the psychology of attention, empathy fatigue, and why everyone's too busy fighting their own battles to notice yours. This part might sting, but it's the dose of realism that sets you free. Second, we'll go deeper into how Stoic philosophy teaches you to own your emotions. No matter what the world gives or takes from you, we'll break down ancient principles like the dichotomy of control, emotional detachment, and voluntary hardship, and translate them into modern practices that work in real life. Finally, we'll end with the art of indifference, not the cold kind that isolates you, but the disciplined calm that allows you to stay centered when the world ignores, rejects, or misunderstands you. It's a way of being that lets you move through life with quiet power, unshaken, unbothered, unstoppable. Because here's what Stoicism ultimately teaches. It's not about withdrawing from the world, but mastering how you engage with it. It's not about being emotionless, but about feeling deeply, without letting feelings dictate your peace. It's not about giving up on people, but about giving up the illusion that people will complete you. In the end, the realization that nobody cares doesn't have to make you bitter. It can make you bulletproof. It can make you free. And once you experience that kind of freedom, you'll wonder why you ever chased approval in the first place. So stay with me. Over the next few sections, we'll peel back each layer of this truth, from the pain, to the peace, to the power, and by the end, you'll see what the Stoics saw thousands of years ago, that you can't control who cares about you, but you can absolutely control the kind of person you become when no one's watching. It starts quietly, the moment you realize that most people aren't thinking about you at all. They aren't judging you as much as you imagine. They aren't waiting for you to fail or succeed. They're simply too consumed by their own storms to notice yours. That truth can feel brutal. You might replay every conversation in your head, every time you tried to please someone, every effort that went unseen. You remember the birthdays you remembered that others forgot, the times you showed up when no one showed up for you. It hurts deeply, but that pain is clarity disguised as disappointment. Because if you look closer, you'll see the paradox. You, too, have walked past people drowning in silence. You scrolled past someone's cry for help, too tired or too distracted to care. Not because you're heartless, but because your own life was heavy. We live in a world where everyone wants to be seen, but few have the energy to truly see others. That's the silent tragedy of modern life. A crowd of people shouting, "Look at me," while nobody is looking at anyone at all. And that's why Stoicism begins with acceptance, not judgment. It doesn't tell you to hate people for being indifferent. It teaches you to stop needing them to be otherwise. When you stop demanding empathy from the world, you stop being its prisoner. You begin to understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "When you rise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to love." He didn't say to be loved. He said to love. That's the shift. You can still care, even when no one cares back, because caring is who you are, not a transaction to be repaid. Once this sinks in, everything changes. You stop chasing attention and start chasing alignment. You stop asking, "Why don't they notice me?" and start asking, "Why do I need them to?" That's where Stoicism begins, at the intersection between pain and awakening. There's a moment every gamer understands, that split second when you realize the game isn't unfair. You just haven't learned its mechanics yet. You keep losing, you keep restarting, you rage at the controls until it hits you. It's not the game that's broken, it's your reaction. Life works the same way. Most of our suffering doesn't come from the difficulty itself, but from the belief that it shouldn't be difficult. That belief, the gap between expectation and reality, is where pain grows. Epictetus said, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." He wasn't saying to blame yourself for everything. He was showing you where your power actually lives. Because power never resides in what happens, it resides in how you respond. This is the Stoic shift, the moment you stop expecting the world to make sense and start mastering your own reactions instead. When you play a game long enough, you start to see patterns. You stop panicking after every defeat. You begin to understand timing, movement, resource management. You adapt. But in life, people rarely stay long enough to learn the mechanics. They quit the moment something feels unfair. A breakup, a rejection, a failure at work. Each of those moments is just a boss battle you didn't prepare for. The Stoics didn't call it a boss fight, but they lived it every day. Marcus Aurelius lost his children to illness, ruled through war and plague, and faced betrayal from those closest to him. Yet his response was measured, calm, and deliberate. He didn't expect fairness. He expected resistance. That's why he won battles most people never even survive internally. When you expect the world to reward effort, you set yourself up for resentment. But when you understand that effort is its own reward, you become unstoppable. That's the Stoic shift. It's like realizing that the goal isn't to beat the game, but to master how you play. Every day is a new level. Every obstacle, an NPC testing your discipline. Every insult, an environmental hazard. You can't change the terrain, but you can learn the controls. You can't lower the difficulty, but you can raise your skill. And when you do, the game doesn't get easier. You just get better. The Stoics would say, stop begging for an easier life. Build the strength to handle the one you have. In gaming terms, stop waiting for a patch update. Learn to speedrun the pain. Epictetus, who was once a slave, could have spent his life hating fate. Instead, he mastered it. His freedom began when he accepted what couldn't be changed and claimed full ownership over what could. That's what Stoicism really is. Emotional mastery is a form of gameplay. You control your moves, your mindset, your reactions. Everything else is background noise. Weather, RNG, other players. And once you see life that way, you stop expecting fairness, because fairness was never the point. Growth was dogged, so the next time you fail, don't ask, why did this happen to me? Ask, what is this trying to teach me about control? Because just like any great game, the world doesn't care if you're frustrated. It only rewards those who learn how to adapt. There comes a time in everyone's life when disappointment stops being a moment and becomes a pattern. You begin to notice that the harder you try to please others, the less they seem to care. You realize that no amount of effort, loyalty, or kindness guarantees understanding. It's a painful realization, but also, strangely, the beginning of wisdom. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They lived in a world of politics, betrayal, hunger, war, a world where even emperors could not control fate. And yet, they discovered a peace so unshakable that it survived exile, poverty, and death. How? Because they stopped demanding that life be fair. They learned to control themselves instead of the world. That's the essence of the Stoic shift. a radical transformation that begins the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How can I meet this with strength?" Every human being carries a quiet illusion that the universe is keeping score. We tell ourselves that goodness will be rewarded, effort will be recognized, love will be reciprocated. But life doesn't operate on that system. The universe doesn't balance our emotional ledgers. Sometimes the cruel prosper, the kind suffer, and the loudest voices drown out the wisest ones. At first, this feels unbearable, like a violation of cosmic order. But the Stoics saw it differently. They realized that fairness, as we define it, is a human invention. Nature doesn't care who's right or wrong. It simply follows laws of cause and effect. Rain falls on both the wicked and the just. Fire burns both the saint and the sinner. The world doesn't target you. It just is. And once you stop taking that personally, you begin to breathe again. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. We waste it trying to edit what cannot be rewritten. Other people, their reactions, their opinions, their gratitude." The Stoics didn't deny that these things hurt. They just refused to let pain become a lifelong tenant. They saw emotion as a visitor. Welcome it, learn from it, and then let it leave. That's what ownership means. It's not about control. It's about responsibility. Responsibility for your inner life, for your thoughts, for how you meet reality. Epictetus said that we are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions we form about things. You cannot stop the insult, but you can stop believing it defines you. You cannot stop loss, but you can stop calling it unfair. You cannot stop change, but you can stop fearing it. Modern life, however, is built on the opposite principle. We are taught that comfort equals success and discomfort equals failure. We seek constant validation from friends, from strangers, from screens. We panic when life refuses to meet our emotional deadlines. Every delay feels like punishment. Every silence feels like rejection. But to a Stoic, silence is not rejection. It's space. It's the quiet between storms where strength is born. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, he wasn't writing for the world. He was writing for himself. Imagine the weight on his shoulders, Emperor of Rome, surrounded by deceit and war, watching his own children die, betrayed by generals and friends. And yet, he didn't collapse under the chaos. He turned inward. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That single line has outlived empires, because ownership begins where illusion ends. The illusion that people will always understand you. The illusion that effort guarantees reward. The illusion that life will bend to your morality. Once these illusions fall, you stand alone, but you stand free. That's why so few people ever experience true peace. They want control, not clarity. They want to command the storm, not learn how to walk through it. But Stoicism teaches that peace is not found in victory. It's found in preparation. When you expect difficulty, betrayal, delay, loss, and yet remain calm, you've already won. Because nothing can surprise the mind that is ready, the modern world calls this pessimism. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Each morning, they would imagine the day ahead not through fantasy, but through realism. I may be insulted today. I may lose money. I may be ignored. I may face sickness or inconvenience. And by imagining these things calmly, they stripped them of their power. They didn't expect life to be gentle. They expected themselves to be strong. Epictetus was once beaten so severely by his master that his leg broke. He looked up and said, "There, you see, it's broken." No rage, no drama, just acceptance, not passive, but conscious. He knew the one thing that could never be broken was his will. Now imagine what that mindset could do in your own life. The next time someone disrespects you, instead of reacting, you remember, this too was part of the design. The next time you're overlooked, you whisper to yourself, this too is training. The next time you're abandoned, you realize, they didn't take my peace with them, I gave it away. That's ownership. That's the shift. Because you can't lose what you never gave others the power to control. Once you truly grasp this, the noise of the world begins to fade. You stop chasing explanations for every wound. You stop collecting apologies as proof of your worth. You stop needing others to act a certain way for you to be okay. You start understanding that peace isn't what happens when everything calms down. Peace is what happens when you stop needing it too. Seneca called it tranquillity sanami, the stillness of the soul. It's not a mystical state. It's discipline, practiced, deliberate. And the more you practice acceptance, the faster you return to equilibrium. You can measure your growth not by how calm you are when life is kind, but by how centered you remain when it isn't. Anyone can stay composed when things go well, but can you stay silent when insulted? Can you stay compassionate when ignored? Can you stay steady when misunderstood? That's the test, and that's where ownership is proven. And here's the paradox the Stoics understood. The less you expect from others, the more you begin to appreciate them. Because expectation breeds resentment, while acceptance breeds gratitude. When you no longer demand perfection, you begin to notice the small kindnesses, the fleeting moments of connection that were invisible before. You start saying thank you instead of finally. You start seeing others as flawed humans, not broken promises. Life softens, not because it changed, but because your perception did. That's the alchemy of Stoicism, turning disappointment into wisdom and detachment into love. Once you begin to see clearly that control was never yours to lose, the world stops feeling like a battlefield. You stop fighting ghosts of fairness. You stop chasing explanations, and something subtle begins to shift inside you, an awakening. The noise that once filled your head starts to fade. You realize that peace was never about getting what you wanted, but about being undisturbed when you don't. It's a strange freedom at first. Quiet, unfamiliar, almost unsettling. You start noticing how much of your suffering was self-authored. The anger that burned you for hours wasn't caused by what they said, but by your need for them to say something else. The sadness that stayed for weeks wasn't caused by what happened, but by your refusal to let it mean what it meant. The disappointment, the resentment, the fatigue, they were all debts created by expectation. This is where ownership deepens. Because it's one thing to know that people won't always care. It's another to stop needing them to. That's when you begin to grow emotionally independent, not detached, but centered. You stop making other people responsible for your inner weather. You stop needing the world to validate the temperature of your soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That single line, if truly lived, could change a life. Because most of us do the opposite. We are harsh with others and gentle with ourselves. We excuse our reactions, justify our anger, explain our bitterness. But the Stoics believed that self-discipline is not punishment. It's liberation. It's how you take back command of your own mind. Emotional ownership means realizing that nobody can make you feel small without your cooperation. It means understanding that offense requires consent. You can acknowledge pain without surrendering your peace. You can feel the heat of anger without letting it ignite you. That's what Marcus meant when he said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." He wasn't preaching weakness. He was showing how to win without fighting. That's something the modern world has forgotten. We've built a culture addicted to reaction. Someone posts, we respond. Someone insults, we defend. Someone disagrees, we rage. But every time we react, we hand away a piece of our sovereignty. The Stoics trained themselves to do the opposite, to pause, to breathe, to act with intention instead of impulse. You can try this for yourself. The next time someone triggers you, an argument, a betrayal, a dismissal, imagine time slowing down. Feel the tension rise in your chest, the quickening of breath, the words forming on your tongue. And then ask, quietly, is this within my control? If not, let it pass through you. If yes, respond with reason, not reactivity. That pause is where your power lives. It's the small space between stimulus and response that separates chaos from mastery. Epictetus called it the discipline of assent, the ability to choose which impressions you accept into your mind. You don't have to open the door to every emotion that knocks. It's easy to mistake this calm for numbness. But Stoicism is not about feeling less. It's about feeling deliberately. It's about learning to navigate emotion like a sailor navigates storms. You don't control the sea, you control the sail. And when you live this way long enough, something changes. The people who used to drain you no longer have that power. The insults that once echoed for days now dissolve in seconds. You still feel everything, but nothing owns you. That's emotional sovereignty. But this doesn't happen through theory. It happens through practice. The Stoics trained their minds daily, just as warriors trained their bodies. They journaled, they reflected, they examined their own hearts ruthlessly. They knew that a calm mind is built, not born. Seneca described one practice that has survived 2,000 years, evening reflection. Every night, before sleep, he would sit in silence and review his day. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said. I conceal nothing from myself. I pass nothing by. It's such a simple act, yet it rewires the soul. Because reflection is how you transform experience into wisdom. You can do the same. Before you sleep, take a few minutes alone. No phone, no noise. Just you and your thoughts. Ask yourself 3 questions. What did I do well today? Where did I give my peace away? How can I take it back tomorrow? Don't answer like a perfectionist. Answer like an observer. You're not there to punish yourself, but to understand. Because self-honesty is the highest form of respect. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, facing your own mind without distraction. But over time, this practice will become your anchor. You'll start recognizing patterns, the same triggers, the same moments where you lose control, the same illusions you keep feeding. And with that recognition comes choice. That's what ownership really is, the moment choice returns. Most people think freedom is about doing whatever they want. The Stoics knew it's about not being ruled by what you want. They believed discipline is the truest form of freedom, because it means your desires don't dictate your destiny. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That line is the foundation of all emotional independence. If your peace depends on someone else's behavior, you're still a slave, just to a softer master. But when your peace depends only on your principles, you become unshakable. You may feel pain, but you won't crumble. You may lose things, but you won't lose yourself. You may walk through chaos, but it won't own you. In time, the entire architecture of your mind changes. You stop living as a reactor and start living as a creator. You stop seeking fairness and start practicing balance. You stop hoping for understanding and start offering compassion. That's when you begin to sense a deep stillness, the kind Marcus described when he said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." It's not isolation, it's alignment. It's the ability to carry peace into any environment, to move through noise untouched, to sit in silence without fear, and from that place, you begin to see life differently. You realize that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strategic detachment. That humility isn't surrender, it's power refined. That acceptance isn't giving up, it's giving space. People will still misunderstand you. They'll say you've changed, become distant, colder. But you know it's not distance, it's clarity. You no longer chase after things that disturb your peace. You no longer argue to prove your worth. You no longer demand to be seen, because you've learned to see yourself. This is what the Stoics meant by living according to nature. Not nature as in forests and rivers, but your inner nature, the order of your mind when it aligns with truth. When you stop resisting what is, you begin to flow with it. Life won't suddenly become easier. There will still be loss, misunderstanding, fatigue. But the difference is that now, nothing inside you will collapse when it happens. Because you've built something stronger than comfort. You've built character. And here's the quiet miracle. When you no longer expect others to complete you, you finally have space to love them freely. When you no longer need everything to go right, you start handling everything that goes wrong with grace. When you no longer fear being alone, you start enjoying your own company. That's emotional independence, the art of standing steady in a world that keeps moving. The world won't slow down for you, but your mind can dot, and that's what ownership truly means. It's not pride, not control, not detachment. It's the quiet confidence that no matter what happens, you remain yourself. It's the understanding that peace isn't a prize you win. It's a skill you practice each night. When you look back on your day, ask yourself not, was it fair? But was I strong? Not, did they care? But did I act with integrity? Not, did I win? But did I remain calm? Because calm is victory. Clarity is victory. Ownership is victory. And when you start measuring your life by those standards, everything changes. You stop waiting for people to treat you better. You start treating yourself better. You stop praying for a peace to come. You start becoming the source of it. And that's the point where Stoicism stops being a philosophy and becomes a way of living, a way of breathing, a way of seeing, a way of walking through the world, untouched, unbitter, unshaken. The world won't care, but you will, and that's enough. There's a quiet moment that comes after you stop chasing people, after you stop expecting the world to understand you. At first, it feels like emptiness, the silence of a space that used to be filled with noise. But if you stay there long enough, you begin to notice something profound. The silence isn't empty at all. It's alive. It's peaceful. It's yours. That is where emotional independence begins. Not in detachment, but in rediscovery. Most people live their entire lives emotionally outsourced. Their peace depends on approval. Their self-worth depends on belonging. Their happiness depends on how gently the world treats them. They believe they're living freely, but in truth, they're always waiting for a message, waiting for a validation, waiting for a sign that they matter. It's exhausting, isn't it? To wake up every day hoping that someone else's words will make you feel enough. The Stoics saw this dependency for what it really was, a form of emotional slavery. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be free, do not wish for anything that depends on another." He wasn't telling us to stop caring. He was teaching us to stop chaining our peace to what we cannot control. The person who depends on praise is just as enslaved as the person who fears criticism. Both are governed by the same master, external opinion. And that's why Stoicism is not about coldness. It's about reclaiming the warmth of your own inner fire. Because when your peace comes from within, nobody can take it from you. You start to see that emotional independence is not about building walls. It's about learning how to stand on solid ground. It's the ability to say, I can care deeply without collapsing. I can love fully without losing myself. I can be disappointed without being destroyed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." He didn't say the happiness of your life depends on the kindness of others or the fairness of fate. He said it depends on the mind, the one thing you always own, even in chaos. But to reach that state, you must confront something most people spend their lives avoiding: your own solitude. When the noise fades, you begin to see how many of your emotions were never truly yours. They were echoes. Echoes of culture, of family, of social comparison. You wanted things not because they fulfilled you, but because you were told you should want them. You chased success because everyone else did. You feared rejection because it mirrored your own doubts. Solitude strips all that away. It reveals who you are when no one's watching. And that's terrifying for most people, because it leaves you face to face with your own emptiness. But the Stoics didn't run from emptiness, they entered it. They believed solitude was a training ground for strength, not a punishment for the lonely. Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who make you better, and welcome those who can improve." The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach. But he also warned, withdraw into yourself as much as you can. He understood balance. That true connection is only possible once you've learned to be whole alone. Because how can you love someone freely if your peace depends on them? How can you offer understanding if your identity collapses without their validation? Dependency turns love into negotiation. Independence turns love into gift. Emotional independence doesn't mean you feel less. It means you feel without distortion. You experience joy without clinging to it, sadness without drowning in it, love without fearing loss. It's the art of presence, being here, in this moment, without bargaining with the universe for a different one. Marcus Aurelius practiced this in the midst of unimaginable loss. He lost several of his children, faced endless war, and endured betrayal. Yet his reflections remained calm, even tender. Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs? He saw fate not as cruelty, but as a teacher. Each event, each loss, each silence, an opportunity to practice mastery over self. Modern life resists this wisdom. We are conditioned to equate love with dependency and freedom with loneliness. But they're not opposites. In truth, they sustain each other. You cannot be free without learning to stand alone. And you cannot love truly without first being free. Think about it. The people you admire most aren't those who need others to validate their worth. They are calm, composed, consistent. They can listen without defending, help without boasting, and walk away without bitterness. They don't depend on outcomes because they already live by principles. That's the Stoic model. Not isolation, but integrity. To practice emotional independence, start small. Notice how often your peace is stolen by something trivial. A delayed text, a cold reply, a look you misinterpret. Each time, pause and ask, why does this have power over me? That question, repeated daily, will expose the invisible strings tied to your emotions. You'll see how much of your distress comes not from what happens, but from your hidden demands about how it should happen. That's the trap. Expectation disguised as logic. We tell ourselves, I'm not asking for much, but every should we hold becomes a chain. He should appreciate me. They should understand. Life should reward effort. But the Stoics never used the word should. They used is. They didn't say, life should be fair. They said, life is what it is, and from that acceptance came clarity. Acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It means you stop wasting strength resisting reality. That energy can now be used to improve yourself instead of resenting others. When you stop trying to fix the world, you can finally begin to master your place within it. And mastery, to the Stoics, wasn't about control. It was about harmony. To live in harmony with nature is to live in agreement with truth, that you are a small part of a vast whole, that everything changes, and that peace comes not from control but from participation. Seneca compared it to being an actor in a play you didn't write. The task of a good actor is to perform well the part he has been given. You don't get to choose your script, only how gracefully you perform it. That's emotional independence in its purest form, the ability to play your part without confusing yourself for the playwright. Every day will test this. You'll face moments that tempt you to fall back into dependence, the craving for recognition, the hunger to be seen. But now, you'll recognize the pattern. You'll feel the tug, the pull, the old reflex rising, and you'll smile. Because you know the game. Instead of reacting, you'll breathe. Instead of reaching out for a validation, you'll reach inward for composure. Instead of blaming, you'll adjust. You will still feel everything, but differently. Anger will become information, not eruption. Sadness will become depth, not despair. Loneliness will become rest, not punishment. This is where the Stoic teachings meet real life. They aren't meant for monks on mountains. They're for people standing in traffic, paying bills, managing relationships, and enduring loss. They're for anyone who wants to walk through chaos with grace. Each day becomes a chance to practice independence, not from people, but from the illusions that chain you to them. So at night, when the world quiets down, try a simple reflection. Ask yourself, did I live today on my own terms? Did I act according to my values or my impulses? Did I let anyone's opinion rewrite my peace? Write your answers. Don't analyze, just notice. Because noticing is how ownership begins over time. These small reflections will weave strength into your mind. You will start recognizing that you don't need the world to applaud your progress. The fact that you see it is enough. And slowly, something remarkable happens. Solitude stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like presence. It becomes your sanctuary, not a prison. That's the paradox of Stoicism. The more comfortable you become alone, the more capable you are of loving others. Because love, in its purest form, can only come from wholeness. The dependent love to escape themselves. The independent love to express themselves. One is born of fear, the other of abundance. When you reach that stage, you will find a new rhythm to life. You will no longer chase outcomes. You will nurture effort. You will no longer seek perfection. You will practice alignment. You will no longer demand understanding. You will offer it freely. That's what freedom looks like. It's not loud. It's not glamorous. It doesn't announce itself. It simply exists, calm, steady, like a mountain in wind. And when storms come, as they always do, you'll realize that peace doesn't mean avoiding them. It means standing still while they pass. That is emotional independence, the art of remaining whole in a world designed to pull you apart. When you reach it, you won't need to prove anything anymore. You'll speak less, but mean more. You'll move slower, but live deeper. You'll stop seeking to be impressive and start aiming to be grounded. The world will still be indifferent, but your heart won't be. It will be steady, open, wise, and that's when you'll understand what Marcus meant when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Strength isn't loud. It isn't domination. It's the quiet confidence that nothing can shake you because you no longer stand on what moves. You stand on yourself, and that unshakable center is the peace the Stoics spent their lives defending. There's a silence that most people run from. It's the silence that comes when you put your phone down, when you turn off the music, when the conversation ends and there's nobody left to fill the air. It's that moment when you realize you're completely alone, and the world doesn't stop for it. For some, That silence feels unbearable, because in it, there's nowhere to hide. There's no distraction, no validation, no proof of existence, only yourself, unfiltered, unperformed, unprotected. And that's where the real work begins. Most of us spend our lives building noise, not because we love it, but because we fear what happens when it's gone. We fill our days with entertainment, conversation, constant connection, all to escape one truth. We're terrified of being alone with our own thoughts. But solitude, the Stoics knew, is not punishment, it's purification. It's the place where you stop performing for the world and start remembering who you actually are. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He didn't write that in peace and comfort. He wrote it while ruling an empire consumed by war and disease, surrounded by betrayal and loss. Yet, he understood something we've forgotten. Solitude is not absence, it's presence. Without distraction, the modern world has taught us to equate solitude with sadness. We call people loners as if it's an insult, as if the ability to be with oneself is a flaw. But look closely at those who are truly grounded. The calm ones, the unshakable ones, they are all comfortable in their own company. They've learned that silence is not a void, it's a mirror. When you stop escaping it, solitude shows you everything you've been avoiding. It reveals your real motives, your buried fears, your unhealed wounds. It confronts you with the truth of who you've become, not who you pretend to be. And at first, it hurts. Because solitude has no mercy for illusions. It takes away the noise you hide behind. But that pain is cleansing. It burns away the false self so the real one can emerge. The Stoics sought this silence deliberately. They practiced what Seneca called voluntary discomfort, spending time without luxury, without noise, without attention, to remind themselves that peace is an inside job. They didn't need the world to be quiet for them to be still. They built stillness inside. When you can sit alone and not feel lonely, you've mastered one of life's rarest arts. Because solitude is where strength is born. The kind of strength that doesn't need applause or agreement to stand tall. Think about the last time you felt deeply lonely. Not the kind that comes from being physically alone, but the kind that comes from being unseen. You were surrounded by people, yet no one really understood you. That's the kind of loneliness the Stoics trained for, not to escape it, but to transform it. Marcus knew that loneliness isn't an enemy. It's a teacher. It teaches you to build a relationship with yourself, to be your own witness, your own comfort, your own guide. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, be willing to stand apart. Be willing to be misunderstood." Most people spend their lives chasing acceptance and lose themselves in the process. But those who embrace solitude stop chasing and start understanding, because solitude sharpens the mind the way friction sharpens steel. It removes the softness created by constant approval. It forces you to grow a spine where you once only had opinions. That's why solitude is essential to inner peace, not optional. Without solitude, reflection is shallow. Without reflection, wisdom is impossible. We live in an age where solitude is dying. We carry constant noise in our pockets. Even when we're alone, we're not alone. We scroll. We consume, we escape. The modern man has forgotten how to be still. But the Stoic, the one who practices awareness, learns to reverse that. They learn to take moments of stillness like medicine, small doses each day, healing the chaos bit by bit. Sit for 5 minutes in silence. No distraction, no input. Just you, your breath, your mind. At first, it will feel unbearable. The mind will panic, searching for something to hold onto. But if you stay with it long enough, the noise fades, and what remains is you. that is the beginning of power. Because when you can be at peace in solitude, you no longer depend on circumstance for calm. You can walk through crowds untouched. You can face rejection without collapse. You can lose things without losing yourself. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Solitude teaches you this truth. When you strip away all excess, noise, possessions, validation, you realize how little you actually need to be content. And that realization is terrifying to the ego. Because the ego thrives on wanting. It tells you that fulfillment comes from more attention, more affection, more success. But solitude teaches you the opposite. Fulfillment comes from less noise, less dependency, less illusion. It's in that emptiness that you find fullness. The Stoics often practiced the view from above, a meditation where they imagined looking down on earth from the stars. From that height, your worries shrink. The arguments, the opinions, the daily chaos, they all look like flickering lights fading into silence. You realize how small everything is and how big your peace can be. From that perspective, solitude stops feeling like exile and starts feeling like home. This is why Stoicism feels so revolutionary today, because it challenges the deepest fear of modern man, being unseen. But the truth is, solitude doesn't make you invisible. It makes you visible to yourself, and that's where transformation begins. When you no longer fear being alone, you stop settling for shallow connections. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop performing. You start speaking less, but meaning more. Your words become precise. Your choices intentional. Your silence becomes eloquent. People will sense the shift. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be threatened by it. Because when you become comfortable in solitude, you stop participating in the emotional economy of validation. You no longer play the game, and that unsettles those who still do. But stay calm. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to build something that doesn't crumble when the world turns away. The Stoics didn't isolate themselves out of arrogance. They withdrew to return stronger. Solitude was their forge, the place where weakness melted into wisdom. Marcus spent countless nights alone, writing to himself in his journals. He didn't write for fame, but for clarity. Those pages, now called meditations, were never meant for us. They were his private conversations with his own soul. That's what solitude gives you, the space to dialogue with yourself, to listen, to confront, to realign. So if you find yourself alone right now, not by choice, but by circumstance, take heart. You're standing in the same silence that shaped philosophers, poets, and saints. The same silence that taught them to see clearly, to feel deeply, to live deliberately. It's okay to miss people. It's okay to wish things were different. But beneath those wishes, remember this: your solitude is not a void to escape. It's a foundation to build upon. Every great transformation begins there. And once you've tasted the stillness that comes from within, you'll never fear being alone again. Because you'll know, solitude doesn't weaken you, it refines you. When you can stand alone, you can walk anywhere. When you can face silence, you can face anything. When you can enjoy your own company, the world can no longer intimidate you. The Stoics weren't born peaceful. They became peaceful by mastering solitude, and maybe that's the journey waiting for you. To stop running from your silence and start walking into it. There, you will find strength that no crowd can give, no loss can take, and no noise can drown. That's the strength that endures, the kind that grows in quiet places, when nobody is watching, when everything else falls away, and all that's left is you. There's a strange kind of peace that arrives the day you stop needing the world to agree with you. It doesn't come suddenly, it comes slowly, after you've been disappointed enough times to finally understand that external validation was never the reward. It was the distraction. The Stoics called this state apatheia. Not apathy, as we understand it. Not numbness, not indifference in the cold sense, but the power to remain unshaken, to live among storms without being swept away, to care deeply, but wisely, to give everything, but never lose yourself. That's liberation. When you reach this point, you stop fighting the world. You stop demanding that people act the way you think they should. You stop measuring your worth by how gently life treats you. You begin to see that everything outside of you is temporary, fragile, fleeting. Beyond command. It's not resignation, it's clarity. The Stoics didn't stop feeling. They stopped being ruled by feeling. Epictetus said, "When something happens, the only thing in your power is your attitude toward it. You can either accept it or resent it." Most people choose resentment. They relive their pain 1,000 times in thought. They argue with reality long after it has already moved on. They keep wounds open because the idea of healing feels like betrayal. As if letting go means what happened was okay. But letting go doesn't mean approval. It means refusing to die in the same place you were hurt. That's what apatheia really is. Not coldness, but courage. The courage to live and tied to what you cannot control. Marcus Aurelius embodied this idea in the quiet strength of his reflections. He wrote, "Receive without pride. Let go without attachment." To him, joy and loss were both visitors. Praise and criticism were both echoes. Neither had the power to define his peace. He had become indifferent not because he was detached from life, but because he was fully in harmony with it. When you reach that harmony, you start to see how heavy your attachments were. You realize that every time you said, "I can't live without this," you were building your own chains. Every expectation, every dependency, every desire that placed your happiness in someone else's hands, each one was a link. Freedom isn't about cutting everything away. It's about holding it lightly. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." That's not poetry, it's instruction. Freedom begins where fear ends, and fear always ends where acceptance begins. Think about how much fear is born from resistance. We resist loss, so we fear it. We resist uncertainty, so we fear the unknown. We resist death, so we fear living fully. But when you embrace these as part of existence, fear dissolves. What you once called anxiety becomes awareness. What you once called loss becomes letting go. The Stoics practiced this through negative visualization, imagining life without the things they loved. Not to depress themselves, but to deepen appreciation and reduce attachment. They would picture losing their wealth, their status, even their loved ones, and instead of despair, they felt gratitude for what remained. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity, because to live truly, you must remember that everything is borrowed, even the people you love, even your body, even your time. When you stop clinging, you start cherishing. When you stop expecting permanence, you begin to experience presence. Apatheia doesn't mean the absence of emotion. It means the presence of mastery. Most people mistake chaos for depth. They believe the more they feel, the more alive they are. But raw emotion isn't aliveness, it's instability. The Stoic knows that depth is not in intensity, but in control. A calm mind sees deeper. A quiet heart feels wider. When you master indifference, you don't become detached from life. You become fully engaged with it, but on your own terms. You begin to choose your reactions instead of being driven by them. You act from principle, not pressure. You start to understand that every moment offers a choice. Participate consciously or react unconsciously. And that's the difference between suffering and serenity. The world hasn't changed. You have. The noise is the same, but your response is different. And that difference is everything. Imagine this. Someone insults you. Before, you would have defended, argued, replayed it in your mind for days. Now, you simply acknowledge it. That's their opinion. You neither agree nor resist. You simply remain still. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's power. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you have the power to be yourself, why chase after what others think?" That's the paradox of indifference. The less you need to prove yourself, the more authentic you become. The less you cling, the more freely you can love. When you reach that state, everything simplifies. You no longer demand the world to be kind before you choose kindness. You no longer wait for a peace to come before you choose calm. You no longer measure happiness by what happens, but by how you meet it. That's why the Stoics saw obstacles as fuel. The obstacle is the way wasn't a slogan. It was a survival mechanism. Because every hardship carries within it a mirror. It reflects your current level of mastery. It shows you what still disturbs you. You will know you've grown not when life gets easier, but when you stop asking it to. That's freedom. That's apatheia. But this liberation doesn't mean disengagement from the world. Quite the opposite. It allows you to engage fully. Because you're no longer driven by compulsion. You work not for approval, but for excellence. You love not to fill a void, but to celebrate connection. You help others not to feel worthy, but because it's right. Your actions become cleaner, your motives simpler, your peace deeper. And then, life starts to flow differently. You begin to understand that most conflicts are energy wasted on things that don't matter. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop arguing with fools, not because you're afraid, but because you're free. You stop needing to be right, because you'd rather be calm. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is more harmful to us than the injury that provokes it. He wasn't exaggerating. Anger destroys the vessel that carries it. Indifference, on the other hand, preserves energy. It's not the absence of care. It's the refusal to waste care. And this indifference, when understood correctly, becomes love's highest form. Because when you no longer depend on someone for your emotional balance, you can finally love them without fear. You don't need to possess them. You don't need to fix them. You can simply appreciate them for what they are: temporary, imperfect, beautiful in their own way. That's how Stoicism turns detachment into compassion. When you stop clinging, you stop judging. When you stop needing, you start giving. When you stop expecting, you start seeing. Marcus once said, "Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time." It sounds fatalistic, but it's profoundly liberating. Because when you realize that what's meant for you cannot miss you, and what misses you is never meant to stay, you relax into trust. Not blind optimism, but trust in the order of things, the rhythm of life. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate. Not mere acceptance of what happens, but gratitude for it. To love fate is to love reality, even its cruelty, even its unpredictability, because within it lies the training that shapes your soul. When you live this way, even suffering becomes sacred. Every wound becomes a teacher. Every fall becomes a test. And through it all, you remain steady. You will still feel sadness, but it will pass through you like rain, not floods. You will still face injustice, but you'll respond with clarity, not chaos. You will still lose people, but you will love them fully, without clinging. That is the freedom of indifference, the power to remain kind in an unkind world, to remain composed in disorder, to remain yourself in disguise of change. It's not about perfection, it's about permanence of principle, because everything else, status, wealth, reputation, even relationships, will come and go. But your integrity, your inner order, your calm, those are yours to keep. If you protect them, This protection is not a wall. It's a choice. The choice to act instead of react, to stay still instead of spin, to love instead of control, to release instead of grasp. Every day, you'll be tempted to forget. The world will provoke you. The noise will surround you. The chaos will demand your attention. But remember, calm is your rebellion. Stillness is your victory. And when people say, "You've changed," you'll know they're right, but not in the way they think. You haven't become cold. You've become clear. You haven't stopped caring. You've stopped clinging. You haven't withdrawn from life. You've stepped deeper into it, on your own terms. That's liberation. The quiet, grounded kind that no success can amplify and no loss can diminish. Because once you understand that nothing outside you is truly yours, everything inside you becomes enough. When you no longer fear losing what you love more purely. When you no longer resist pain, you suffer less. When you no longer chase peace, you realize it was always here, waiting. Beneath the noise, beneath the ego, beneath the need to control. That's the final paradox of Stoicism. When you stop trying to feel good, you start feeling whole. And once you taste that wholeness, that still, centered state where you want nothing, fear nothing, and regret nothing, you'll realize that liberation was never about escaping the world. It was about no longer being enslaved by it. You'll walk through the same streets, face the same problems, meet the same people, but something inside you will be different. You won't react, you'll respond. You won't hurry, you'll move deliberately. You won't chase calm, you'll embody it. And that's how peace begins, not as an event, but as a decision repeated every day. The decision to be free. At some point, everything you've heard so far begins to merge into one quiet realization that the search for peace was never a journey outward. It was always an inward return. Every lesson the Stoics taught leads back to the same doorway. Mastery over self. You can trace it through each stage. When you realized that nobody cares, you stopped living for applause. When you learned to take ownership, you stopped blaming others for your pain. When you found emotional independence, you stopped needing others to complete you. When you embraced solitude, you discovered that silence isn't emptiness, it's freedom. And when you understood the power of indifference, you finally learned how to walk through life untouched. That's the cycle, not a circle, but a spiral. Each time you return to the same truth, you see it from a higher place. Because peace isn't a final destination. It's a daily discipline. It's the art of choosing calm in the middle of chaos, of returning to reason when emotion pulls you away, of remembering who you are when the world tries to make you forget. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." He understood something that still escapes most of us. The world doesn't give you peace. It gives you practice. Every frustration, every setback, every betrayal, every silence, all of it is practice. Life isn't testing how much you can endure. It's teaching you how deeply you can remain unbroken. And the beauty is that you don't have to be perfect to live this way. You just have to begin. You begin by catching yourself when your mind drifts into resentment. You begin by breathing instead of reacting. You begin by writing down your thoughts at night, the same way Marcus did. Seneca called this returning to the self. He said, "Each day, withdraw into yourself. The crowd will always be there tomorrow. It's not an escape, it's a reset." The mind, like the body, needs stillness to stay strong. So when you wake up tomorrow and the noise returns, the deadlines, the judgments, the distractions, don't see them as enemies. See them as teachers. Ask yourself, how can I practice peace in this? That's Stoicism. Not withdrawal from the world, but mastery within it. And you'll fail sometimes. You'll lose your temper. You'll overthink. You'll care too much about something trivial. But even then, you can return to yourself. Because Stoicism isn't about never falling. It's about always rising faster, calmer, wiser. You start to notice progress in small ways. You take criticism without collapsing. You endure delay without panic. You lose something precious and still manage to smile. That's growth. Quiet, invisible, uncelebrated growth. The kind that doesn't make headlines but changes lives. And one day, you'll realize that the same things that used to disturb you no longer touch you. The same chaos that once broke you now moves round you like wind round stone. You'll see that the world didn't change. Your perspective did. That's what the Stoics meant when they said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom isn't the absence of problems. It's the absence of inner chains. So stop searching for a life without obstacles. Search for the strength to meet them with calm. Stop waiting for people to understand you. Start understanding yourself. Stop hoping for peace to arrive. Start becoming the source of it. That's the real Stoic revolution. To live in a world that shouts and still choose silence. To live in a culture of reaction and still choose reflection. To live in times of noise and still choose clarity. And maybe that's why Stoicism still speaks across centuries. Because it reminds us of something we've always known but keep forgetting. That nothing is truly ours except our own. And not possessions, not status, not even relationships, only the space within where thought becomes choice. And choice becomes character. Seneca wrote, "The greatest empire is to be emperor of oneself." That's not metaphor, that's instruction. Be the ruler of your own reactions. Govern your thoughts with justice, your actions with courage, your words with wisdom, your emotions with temperance. That's the Stoic kingdom, invisible, internal, indestructible, and from that place, you can live with grace. You can face insult without resentment, loss without despair, success without pride. You can love without needing, give without expecting, and walk through the world in quiet strength. This is not easy work. It's lifelong. But every day that you return to yourself, that you choose awareness over impulse, composure over chaos, you become a little more free, a little more present, a little more alive. So tonight, as you finish this reflection, pause for a moment. Feel your breath. Feel the stillness between thoughts. That's you before the noise, before the roles, before the fears. That's the part of you the world can't touch. Protect it. Return to it. Live from it. Because the truth is, nobody is coming to save you. But that's not bad news. It means you've always had the power to save yourself. The Stoics knew this long before psychology gave it names. They understood that self-reliance isn't loneliness, it's liberation. That silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. That letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And when you finally learn to see through the illusion of control, you realize the paradox that defines every Stoic's peace. You don't need life to be easier. You just need to be steadier. So take that steadiness with you into your work, your relationships, your silence, your chaos. Let it be the rhythm you walk to. Let it be the calm you carry. And if one day you forget, as we all do, remember these words. You are not what happens to you. You are how you meet what happens to you. That's the whole philosophy. That's the freedom no one can take. That's the stillness the world keeps trying to shake, but never can. And if this message has reached you today, perhaps it's because you were ready to hear it. Ready to stop surviving and start living deliberately. So keep going. Keep practicing. Keep choosing calm. Even when it feels impossible. And when you need a reminder, come back here, not to listen to me, but to listen to yourself. Because deep down, You already know everything the Stoics knew. You've just forgotten how quiet truth sounds. If this reflection spoke to you, let it stay with you tonight. And if you want more reminders like this, lessons from ancient Stoicism for modern life, follow StoicCraft. Not for motivation, but for grounding. Not to escape reality, but to walk through it with peace.